All right. Mm, Getting right back to it. You know, I'm not I'm the I'm not gonna say I love the solo episodes, but they're kind of growing on me, um, at least a little bit, and they're not as difficult to get myself to bring myself to do anymore recently, and I don't really know why. Um, there was a really interesting. It's funny. I don't actually really see necessarily very eye to eye with what he says, but Tim Dillon, the comedian, has this political podcast. It's like a comedy political solo podcast that airs once a week, um, and it's so it's so interesting because you kind of get everything he says makes sense, but he also makes no sense. He it doesn't have he makes no sense, but his train of thought is so fascinating to observe. And you could tell how incredibly creative and off the cuff smart he is. I don't think there's any way that, I mean, I'm sure he prepares. I'm certain he prepares for the episodes and has the news topics he wants to talk about and things he wants to say. But the way he jumps from one topic to the next, and the way that the jokes that he makes and the observations and like the very very dry, witty and outrageous things that he says kind of all just blend together into a really interesting show. And it's really cool because, and I guess, having done, I think, 4 or 5 solo episodes now, and the average length probably being anywhere between 40 and 50 minutes. So I guess average length is 45 minutes. He does it for an hour, 15 minutes each. It's really impressive. I mean, for him to talk by himself for an hour and 15 minutes straight and have something of substance to say and be creative every week is really, really impressive. I mean, I'm kind of happy he only does it once a week. I don't know how much I'd be able to tolerate listening to that like 3 times a week or even attempting to listen 3 times a week. And he probably does himself a favor, um, more good than bad by limiting himself because it's the kind of thing that you could tolerate. Like, okay, like, once a week, cute, funny, outrageous. I don't know if I agree with that, but I kind of hear where he's coming from. And then you move on. I think it's really cool. So, yeah, back in Florida, I had a very good, I'm very happy with the last week that I had of episodes and podcasts. I was especially excited to talk to Keith Rubenstein, who I guess if you haven't listened to his episode, I I enjoyed a lot of it. Keith and I do business together, and he's a really, really phenomenal guy, incredible salesman, sweet guy. Um, you know, easy, very, very communicative in terms of texting. Almost impossible to get on the phone for the most part, but every single time I talk to him on the phone, I've only talked to him on the phone, I think 4 or 5 times in my life. Um, I met him. He and I met on the phone. He and I started discussing business for the first time when I was just getting started out, and I had an eBay listing that he was interested in. And he's just a king of getting really, really good and cheap deals. So a lot of times, it's hard to actually make a deal work with him on my end to try to make any kind of money, and for him to be happy at the cost that he's getting. But he and I, every time that we've spoken, we had a million things to talk about. We had a million things in common, and we like the same music. Like similar music, TV shows. We talk about life. We talk about kids, and I mean, yeah. And that episode was kind of just like a regular one of our phone calls, which is the best episodes that I think I put out, or like the ones where my friends say it's almost like you're listening to a wiretap of our of a phone call that I'm having with whoever it is, and and so so I thought it was really a lot of fun. I thought it was really productive. I think it was a little all over the place, not necessarily a bad way, just covering a lot of ground. And then there was a lot of industry talk. And the truth is that I don't know how interesting the industry talk is to anyone that's listening. Um, I think that if anyone is interested in learning, there's a lot of cool information out there, and that guy knows a ton in terms of the medical equipment world. Which is only like, or especially refurbished medical equipment world. The whole industry is only like, I think, 25, 30 years old, maybe 35, 40 years. But that was like the beginning. And he's really seen the whole industry explode. And so it's cool to see how he was such a big part of it. And, and then getting to his personal life was also awesome. And I really, really enjoyed, excuse me, talking with Herman. Herman's a great dude. He was my neighbor for the last couple of years when I lived in Hollywood, in between, in my old townhouse. And he and I were, I met him. There was actually, I was on my way to go swimming. I used to swim every day to exercise until I realized that it wasn't working, and I was just maintaining my fat. And so I was walking back from the pool, and and there were a bunch of cops we had a community pool. There was a bunch of cops by the townhouses, and they weren't letting me go back to my house. I said, "What's going on?" Apparently, they thought there was a shooting in our community, and so me and Herman were stuck, and we never met each other. And he looked kind of, he was new to the community, and we started shooting the shit and talking, and and then we realized, and then obviously, as you could probably, and then based on that episode, and if you haven't listened, a lot of it was about craft beer, which I think was fun, and I think it's cool. I think it's cool to deep dive into very specified and unique industries, so dive deep into, craft beer, who makes the best beers in the country, and dive deep into small businesses, and dive deep into large businesses, and, how they work, and the inner workings and outer workings, and the public perception versus reality, all that stuff. So he and I were talking about, so I mentioned, so I don't know how he even came up, but we just talked about how we like beer. We became buddies. We hung out a lot. He comes to poker nights. He comes to watch. I think he came once to watch UFC. We have a group of buddies that watch UFC. We'll probably do a podcast next time we fight. Next time there's a big fight. The next fight I think is in a couple of weeks in the Vegas Sphere, which actually I would love to go do. And I think there's like zero chance of me going because I have way too many responsibilities on a day-to-day life that I have to be a part of. But I think it would be awesome to be able to do that. Um, and it's a cool sport. It's a really, really, really awesome sport. I've been into it for less than a year, but it's something that's very easy to get on board with, and it's something that's very easy to kind of just pick up. And he's been a good friend, and I really wanted to get a little bit more into his life, because he was born, I think he's Venezuelan, um, and again, because he's in the import and export business for seafood and vegetables, and it was really, really fun. It was really, really cool. And I've heard him tell some really crazy stories. Just, I was saying, whenever we'd sit down and have a beer or go to a brewery together in the area, he would always tell me some crazy, crazy stories. And I was really hoping that he would elaborate on some of them. I'd probably push him a little bit more next time we do an episode. Maybe he was a little nervous this time. I don't know. But we were drinking a bunch of beers, and we did have a good time. And yeah, I hope to get him back to really talk about more. So yeah. Anyway, I'm back in South Florida, and I'm really happy to be back. It's it was a really interesting phenomenon that I've experienced a lot, and I really try to actively actually avoid. When you have a really, really great experience, say you're going to a restaurant with a particular group of people, say three or four friends, or even like you're at a bar and you meet up with, and end up hanging out with a stranger, talking to them, shooting the shit, and you guys have a really great night. Actually, I had this occasion when I first moved into my townhouse in Hollywood. There was a local bar uh, that was down the block from my townhouse called Shenanigans. Um, the place was really cool. It was an Irish pub, tons of screens and sports, and a couple, a pool table or two, and it was just a really cool vibe. Drinks weren't too expensive, and my wife and I went there. Just it was like we're usually at that point. I was waking up pretty early in the morning. I was waking up around like 5:15, and I was trying to get into bed at like 10. generally speaking. And so, we decided just randomly one night, I think it was like a Tuesday or Wednesday night, let's just go there. We'll go to Shenanigans, have a good time, and just see what the scene's like. Because I saw it was an Irish pub. I'm a big fan of Irish culture, the music, the mob, the stories. I love Ireland. I've been to Dublin twice. I went to Galway once, and so and so whenever I see an Irish pub, I'm always happy to stop in and check it out. Grab a Guinness on tap. And so my wife and I went, and we could walk, which is a benefit too, because obviously I don't have to worry about an Uber or driving home. And we get there, we're sitting around the bar, and there's probably 6 people, 5 or 6 people around the bar. And we're looking at the menu, and I don't recognize really anything on this menu in terms of the mixed drinks or in terms of, what are these, they call it like these like cocktail shots that are these mixed drinks in a shot. And so, it'd be like, let's say, I think they have one called the Baby Guinness, which is like a little bit of Guinness with Jameson and Kahlua and or Bailey's or whatever it is, and it's all in like a 2-ounce shooter, and it's very pleasant, very easy. Um, and so, long story short, at the bar. Actually, it's already a long story, but we're at the bar and we're trying out a couple of different drinks that they have. One of the drinks is called an Irish car bomb. I didn't know what that was, and it was a beautiful thing. It turns out it was, I would say about a quarter cup of Guinness, and you drop a shot of Jameson into it, and you chug it, and it's a good time. Also, probably not meant for a Wednesday night at like 9 p.m. With with a guy and his wife in the mid 20s that are working in professionals, and but I wanted to try it anyway, so I tried, and then the guy next to me at the bar goes, yeah, hey man, like, can't do an Irish car bomb alone. I said, okay, well, why don't you do one with me? He goes, sure. So get to Irish car bomb. We all do one together. Me and my wife, this stranger, a couple other people. Out of the 6 people at the bar, 1 or 2 others just like piqued their head in interest, and then I was like, listen, if you guys want, get the next round. If we all do, I'll buy a car bomb for everyone to do it. So next thing you know, everyone's taking turns buying rounds of mixed drinks for everyone. I never had an experience like that. I know that if you're above the age of probably 40 or 35, you probably had some kind of experience like that, because um, I think that people were more social and more generous and less wary of strangers, um, 15, 20 years ago than they are definitely way more than they are today. And I do think that our social skills obviously have kind of dropped off a little bit. And not only our social skills, again, our trust in the people that we see around us. You kind of look at people more like a threat than we probably should. And it's probably better for us as a world and as a society to kind of look at someone and pretty much give them benefit of the doubt. Just say you're probably a pretty decent person, and then there are obviously pretty quick telltale signs that you can tell when someone's not. Um, just a regular, regular healthy dude or girl. So, so anyway, so we're all having a good time, and we're talking, and we're drinking, and a couple of us exchange our numbers to, meet up again. And anytime you're back here, let me know. I'll grab a drink together. None, it didn't really happen again. But this is actually, a very long version of the story or the point that I'm trying to make, which is that when we when we have a certain experience at a certain place with a certain group, and we have a really, really wonderful time, we not only do we do our best to try to replicate it, but we have these certain expectations that just that are unreasonable. I don't know about, I don't even want to call it unreasonable though. We have certain expectations that the next time we do this, if we were to replicate this exact scenario again, that we'd have the exact same night and the exact same outcome and the exact same level of or experience of that was such a great time. Let's do that again. And it happened with me in college a bunch of times with different friends, having meals with them on Friday nights or Saturdays, or going out with people Saturday nights. And you have this amazing time and you go, yo, we got to roll that back. Let's have a great time. And you do it. And the expectations, I think it's the expectations, I could be wrong, but the expectations kind of set you up for failure. And you're kind of just waiting for this amazing thing to happen that was organic, And one time, and almost like a flash of inspiration, I don't even know where these moments necessarily come from, that like the lightning doesn't always, usually just, lightning usually strikes once. And and usually if you try to go back to the original spot where that lightning struck, you're probably not going to get struck by it again. But because we are pattern seeking animals, and because we're meaning, we have these such strong associative brains where we, associate these times with these people and this incredible experience with this place. You go there and you kind of expect the exact same thing to happen, and you expect everything to be exactly the same, and you expect that exact amazing experience, and it didn't happen. And I went back a couple of times to shenanigans, and I got a couple of Irish car bombs, and mostly full or mostly empty bar, different scenarios, and nothing ever happened with it, and I was a little disappointed, and I was a little let down, but at the end of the day, that's what happens. I mean, lightning doesn't strike twice, and so I've found that it's much healthier and much better to not keep on trying to replicate these experiences, but just say that was a really amazing time. Now, what else can I do? Or what else can I do? And there's certain things that you do consistently enjoy, and go ahead and enjoy the consistent, reliable things. But if you're expecting that lightning again, if you're expecting that magic moment with this perfect moment with these strings, I mean, I probably wrote 10 poems about that night alone, because there's something that was so romantic and so nostalgic and so beautiful about that experience of just sitting around a bar on a Wednesday night with a bunch of people, and my wife and I are going home, and we're walking home. We're both pretty tipsy. We take a shower, pass out, and wake up. We're like, that was so much fun. That was such a good time. and um, and then you want to do, and you want the exact same thing again, but it doesn't happen. So I think I'm having. So I had a little bit of a similar experience when I went to rejoin my community. And and I think I guess it's important to elaborate, for anyone that is not Jewish and listening to this, or anyone that's not Orthodox Jewish and listening to this. You generally speaking, weekends are Sabbath or Shabbos, and you go to synagogue on Friday nights and Saturdays. And generally speaking, because you're not using electronics and you're not driving anywhere, you're you're kind of forced in a really beautiful way to spend a lot of time with the people that live within a walking distance from you, because this is your community. These are the people you're spending time with, and you can't really do much else. And so our community, or the community that I was a part of when I joined it, was consisted of, say 15, maybe 20 consistent families, and everyone, for the most part. I mean, I got along with pretty much everybody, and I really liked excuse me, everybody. And I was very excited to come back to what this quote unquote perfect scenario was. And I left, the community, because when I sold my house at the end of April, of 2024, and I returned for the first time to this community right now, end of August 2024. So 5 months later, 4 months later, and uh, everything felt like it had dramatically changed. And for me, the experience of having, the entire time while I'm traveling and while we're alone and while we don't have our friends and our communities over weekends, and, and people, and our home to be comfortable, and, just to have our stuff just in set places instead of living out of suitcases for months with the wife and the baby. Um, we get back and we were expecting this magic moment, the similar one that, like, the first time I went to shenanigans, and it just didn't happen. And it really, I mean, today's Monday. I experienced this all on Saturday, and then Saturday night till probably this morning, until actually right now while I'm talking this out, there was something that was really weighing on me, and I guess this is it. I guess, and this talking it out is really, really beneficial, and hopefully it could provide, you, some insight and some help. Just like, not help in terms of anything, but help just in terms of recognizing that this happens in life, and trying not to set ourselves up for this moment too many times, where we don't have where we have to, when we have something that's magic, it's not going to stay like that forever. That's part of what makes it magical. And then the next, and then to go, but then I have to go ahead at least myself in particular. Now the entire situation changed. Now there's another 20 families in the community that I haven't met, and now it doesn't have that feeling of you're walking into like a little home that everyone knows one another, and it's almost like it really felt like you walk into like if you have I don't know any kind of like club or class, if you have like a rock climbing class, a yoga class, a group of buddies that you meet up at a brewery with, or whatever the case may be, and then you walk back in, instead of it being just your family in your home, there's another 40 people there. You kind of get a little lost in it, and you kind of feel a little like things aren't the same, and they're not the same. And the truth is that the fact that it's not the same also gives opportunity to create another moment of this magic, this lightning that could happen, um, and I guess because it's different, I have this, and we have a natural inclination to avoid things that are new, things that are uncomfortable, things that are different. Myself, for sure. I experience that extremely, extremely heavily. And I like to say that I like to put myself into new situations. And I have put myself into a lot of new worlds and new scenarios and new environments. But you kind of feel like, yeah, and but at the end of the day, even though you might say that, what you really feel might be something else, and you really do want to be comfortable, and you really do want things to be easy. So, and you really do want things to be familiar and recognizable and the same. And this really wasn't for me. So the feeling of this community is new. I just spent the last X amount of months traveling to, hoping to get back here, and now this isn't what I thought it was going to be. I've spent all my money on this house, and I'm dealing with all the headaches and selling the house and closing a new house and all this money that I've saved my entire life to be able to do this. Um, and is this what this is for? Is this what it's all about? And yeah, the answer ultimately is yeah. And the answer is that even right now, for the moment, like this is what it's about, and it's time to make something new work, and it's time to make something. There's a new experience, there's a new opportunity to create another new world and another new environment that that has kind of emerged organically since I'd left in the last 3 months. And it's actually really cool that it does happen, and that it did happen. And it's really cool that how word of mouth, just causes people to just get up and move somewhere new. I think it's really incredible. It's really, really unique. It's really, really special, and it kind of shows also how beautiful this life is, where it's always just like it feels like the community is like alive and breathing, and like went through a growth spurt, and like now it's like that kid that you hadn't seen. You see a kid when he's 10, and then next thing you know he's 16, and he's twice, he grew a foot, and he works out, and he's in better shape, and you're like, whoa, what happened? He has a beard now, and you're like, what happened to you, dude? um we had that quite a bit actually with my brother-in-law, because when I met him, he was I think he was in eighth grade, and now he's going into 12th grade, and um, you know, looks super, 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 super different than what he did. Um, but yeah, so that's what's been happening in my end, in terms of this community, in terms of what I've been thinking about, and I think that this is universal. I think that a lot of people experience this, and to put this out there and to say, I think it'd be really useful and beneficial to say it's not only you, it happens to everyone. B, it's not a bad thing necessarily, it's a new thing, and it presents itself as a new opportunity, even though it's really, really uncomfortable. Um, and yeah, you're not alone in this, and I think that makes a huge difference. So I had a friend, David Izzo. Um, he used to have a podcast called "Don't Worry About It," and it was basically supposed to be a mental health podcast talking about people, people's struggles. Um, he's not a professional, never claims to be, but he was a really good conversation facilitator, and he was really, really excellent at just getting people to talk, and getting people to express themselves. And one of the enormous values of the podcast that I felt that he brought to the table was when I listened to probably 10 episodes before I got on and actually recorded myself, joined the conversation myself. And and one of the things that I thought was so important about the podcast was the fact that there are a lot of people that, a lot of people, especially, I mean, there was a stigma, there still kind of is, but a lot less. But there was a stigma that you can't have a hard time, that you can't feel like you're lost, you can't feel like you're anxious or depressed or because you're not one of those people. But we all are. Um, and life is difficult enough to navigate, and life is complicated enough that people don't just have an easy time just making their way through it. And it feels so much better to know that someone else is also going through that. And I'm listening to these people, and I've known a lot of these guys that he had on, and these girls he's had on. I've known them for years. They were from similar schools or similar backgrounds or similar, we were friends in Manhattan when I was spending a lot of time there, and I never knew that they had this part of them, but it made me feel, it definitely made me feel like it's okay that I was going through these feelings, and it was okay that I was going through these hard times because it's not only me, and I'm not the crazy person. So just like that had that benefit. I'm really hoping that a lot of times you can listen to these things. It's part of why people love comedians, I think, too, because when you have a comedian, I was talking to a friend about this weekend, and yeah, I was talking about a friend, and he was listening to a comedian, and he was telling me, um, like, part of what he enjoyed so much about the comedian was the guy kept on making references to very, very specific things in the comedian's life that my friend thought that he was the only person that would experience that. And then he heard that not only did he hear the comedian talk about it and be like, "Oh wow, that's funny," but he heard the people laughing about it and obviously relating to it, and obviously understanding where the comedian was coming from and having experienced that themselves as well. And he said that was one of his favorite things about watching this comedian. And I think that there's something really great about that because there's a lot of stigmatized conversation that we're afraid to have, and there's a lot of stigmatized conversation that we're afraid to admit out loud to ourselves and other people. But if we ever do, we find out that we're really not unique in that sense. We're really not alone in that sense. That we really could do great things, and that we really do have this in common, and it's really okay, and it's really not that big of a deal. It's really normal, and you'll be able to make it through, and you'll be able to go on. You'll make it through till tomorrow. So that was just one of the things that was on my mind today in terms of things to talk about. Um, Again, overall, I'm extremely happy with the way this podcast has been going. I'm going to keep on putting out content. Right now, I'm trying to figure out really the best way to go about getting more guests and what kind of guests I want to speak to, because I think that I've been trying to listen to a lot of different types of new podcasts or exposing myself to new podcasts to see A, what kind of guests people have on, and B, what kind of content they put out. And is this the kind of, and are those the kind of people that I'd want to reach out to? And I, unfortunately, I mean, it feels to me that a lot of conversations that are happening on podcasts aren't as come together as I would like it to be. And now I know that that was the case, but I thought that was most of the case with the big podcasts and the big episodes. Um, and I really want to be very intentional about having people on, either that they themselves have this uh, perspective, that this unifying pro conversation, pro disagreeing with one another, but in a really healthy way and talking things out instead of just screaming and yelling and not listening to anyone, and hopefully eventually changing your mind. Um, I hope, it's hard to find those kind of people. I was talking to one of my good friends, Avi Shazkis, who I hope to get on soon. I'm 28. I think he's 52 or 53. But he's a really good friend of mine. He's really, really intelligent. He's really, really brilliant, and he's really, really fun. And he has a lot of really great things to say. But one of the things that he was telling me was, I was like, "How was your week?" He was like, "Dude," he said, "the worst." He goes, "I could tell that I was in a really, really shitty mood because I got into a political argument with someone." He goes, "I go, dude, you're not even political. You're not political though. You don't have like, you don't get involved in that." And he's like, "I know." He goes, "That's what was so upsetting about it." And we were talking about that a little bit, and you said, the reason why I don't get into these conversations or I even bother with them is because when's the last time you had a conversation where you heard someone say something and you actually changed your mind? And I said, well, for me, actually, it's quite a bit. Um, and he was pretty surprised by that. He said, really? And I was like, yeah, man, like, there's a lot of things in my life that being open-minded had caused me to change my perspective. And I think it's a really, really good thing. I think it's a really, really cool thing. And I think it's really, I'm rewatching House of Cards with my wife right now. Um, what a great show. Such an awesome show. But one of the things that happens in the show um, is that they don't say whether Frank is a Republican or a Democrat. They kind of just present um, corrupt behavior. And they don't, I mean, they pretty much say that he's a Democrat almost by the virtue of the fact that he's in Hollywood. But a lot of the issues or a lot of the behaviors that are expressed are, what's the word for it? Unilaterally, or they're done. This behavior is done by both sides, and and one of the things that they did in the show was Frank or Kevin Spacey was trying to get someone fired. And he was trying to find dirt on the guy, and he was trying to figure out what the guy did wrong, what the guy has done wrong that he could kind of expose him and put out and leak the story, leak the narrative, get the guy to resign because of humiliation, intimidation, and what they did was and it was a little bit of a stretch, but it ended up working out for him. He ended up finding someone that said that in college, this guy's probably in his 40s, in the show, and in college, he was the editor of a newspaper, and the newspaper ran something that was anti-Israel in the show, and then because he was the editor, they leaked. He had he saw he had them run a story. He had the people that he was corresponding with run a story about how this guy could be anti-Semitic because he voted against Israel, and not vote against Israel, but he allowed this article to be published while he was the editor that was anti-Israel, and this guy was like, "What are you talking about? This happened when I was 18. I don't remember every story that was published while I was the editor, and I certainly never said anything. You could check my entire history. I never endorsed anything that was anti-Semitic or anti-Israel, even the slightest bit. But it didn't even make a difference. And so there was a lot. So what essentially happened was someone said one thing. One thing happened to one person one time, and he wasn't allowed to change his mind. He wasn't allowed to argue. He wasn't allowed to explain his perspective. He wasn't allowed to say. He wasn't allowed to even just say, even if I did think that I was 18 years old. I changed my mind. My perspective is different. I'm more mature. Whatever, and then all these factors changed. And we don't give people the benefit of the doubt. We don't even encourage people to change by locking us. I mean, this is obviously just this is on a TV show, but this happens quite a bit in real life, and it's something that I think about quite a bit. Also, especially as I'm starting this podcast, the things I say now are not the things I'm going to think in a year or in 6 months or in 5 years or definitely not in 10 years. My relationship with everything has changed dramatically over time. And and the things that I thought when I was 17, or the things that I posted about on Facebook when I was 14, or the things that I feel or wrote to myself, even like letters to myself, these deep spilling my soul out to myself letters that I write to myself. I look back on them from 2017 or 2019 or even 2020, 2021. I don't even recognize who that person is. And I actually think that's a good thing. I think that should be encouraged. That should be like we should applaud the fact that someone thought something one way and then changed their mind and changed their perspective, and now, because the world is different and because they're different and because every scenario is different, they have a different or more nuanced or developed or just totally different in general. They just change their position on it and they change what they think about it. Or you might think something about, you have an opinion on, how many kids you want to have, and then you have one kid, and you realize, oh my God, this is the best thing ever. I wasn't even sure I wanted a kid, but now that I have one, I want five. And then you say, okay, well now I want five kids. So what? Someone's gonna you know come up to you and say, hey, man, listen, you can't have five kids because you said in 2017 that you wanted to have one kid, and now you have to stick with that because that was it. That was your opinion, and you wrote about that, and you published it, and you posted it on Facebook or Twitter or whatever it is, or X or whatever it is, and so now you can't change your mind, and you have to, and now you're stuck having one kid forever. I think that we should reward people changing their minds and growing and not being blindly committed to things that they thought when they were 10, 15, 20, 30, 40, 50. And the same people that keep the same perspective and don't change their views on anything in the course of their lives, or for 20 years, or even for 2 years. I think that there's something strange about that. And you know, I think that wisdom and nuance and perspective, the reason why we attribute that to people that are older, when you say, you expect people to, older people to be advisors, you go to them for life advice, or you talk to them about something that you experienced, excuse me, a big part of the reason why we go to them is because we kind of figure that they've been through what we're going through, and they've made mistakes and learned how to not replicate those mistakes and change their perspective about that. And I think that we should be doing that about everything. I think we should be doing that as politicians. I think we should be doing that as business owners. I think we should be doing that even in our careers. I mean, you hear, and it's funny because there are some of the most successful people at whatever craft they choose to go into, or whatever craft they're in. A lot of times, they weren't just in that one craft their entire lives. An example that just jumped straight to the top of my head was in the old TV show Frasier, which is one of my favorite shows. I thought that, I mean, it was a little sitcom, a little cute, a little cheesy, but overall, it was a really cool and funny blend of sophisticated, goofy, pretentious, but accessible to everyone. So like, for example, I was watching that show in college, and I was an English major, creative writing and literature, and a lot of the British literature that I was learning about, or a lot of the old English literature that we were reading, or Shakespeare, I would I would get these references and these nuanced jokes, from Frasier and Niles, but at the same time, there's a lot of very goofy, silly comedy or slapstick humor, or physical humor. What's his name? David Hyde Pierce, who plays Niles, is one of the best physically physical comedians. As in, he is very, 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 very funny with his body, with his facial expressions, with the way he moves himself, with the way that he falls, and he's exaggerated. So in that show, Marty Crane, so you have two brothers, you have Fraser and Niles, who are both pretentious, um, intellectual psychologists, that are snobby people that like to find things in life, wouldn't go to a restaurant unless it had, several dozen five-star reviews and, and wrote about it in the newspapers. And then you have the dad, Marty Crane, who's a blue-collar retired police officer, and he just likes a good beer and his ugly, comfortable couch and his dog and a $3 steak or a $5 steak. And and he was one of the most beloved characters in the show, and he really made the show. He really just brought the dynamic together. He was really really wonderful, and he died a couple of years back, I think in 2020 or 2021. And he was just an older guy. He was already older in the show, and the show I think aired in the late 90s, early 2000s, and I just did a quick Google just to see, after he died, just to see what his life was like and what other stuff he was in, and it turns out that this guy wasn't an actor until I think he was in his 40s, and he actually had a completely different career. I can't recall at the moment what it was, but then he just changed his mind. He just said, you know what, like my life is not going to be exactly the same, and I've only got one life to live, and I can't be too committed. I'm not going to be committed to something for the sake of being committed to it if it doesn't feel real or honest to myself. And so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do this. And and then, and then lo and behold, he becomes the main, really a centerpiece to one of the most successful sitcoms or one of the most successful air television shows to ever be created. And I think that the same thing should really apply to everything. And I actually think I'm not going to very frequently get political. I'm not going to really talk about my opinion very much, even though I don't really have very strong opinions one way or another, again, because I'm usually pretty open to changing them. But I think that the fact that this past Friday, Robert Kennedy Jr. dropped out and endorsed Donald Trump, um, which was just trying a couple of months ago to run as a Democrat, is a beautiful example of this, And so right now, if you have a hypothetical potential Trump presidency, whether one way or the other, whether you like Trump himself or not, um, if you have a Trump presidency, you're going to have one of the most diverse and eclectic group of people that are going to be part of part of his team. You're going to have Elon Musk, who previously was always was voted Democrat and considered himself a Democrat. You have Robert Kennedy Jr., of course. The Kennedy family has to be, is one of the most famous Democrat families of all time, and he himself is a Democrat until 6 months ago. You have Tulsi Gabbard, who apparently is going to join his team. She ran as a Democrat, and and the point, and a lot of them haven't really thrown away their classic liberal views. A lot of them have maintained their classic liberal views, and just they haven't been able to succeed in the liberal party. So they're kind of making this unity. Yeah, the way they're calling it is a unity party, and I think that's really. I think that's a perfect example of the things that I'm talking about, which is it's okay to you don't have to be blindly allegiant to anything in your life just for the sake of being allegiant to it, just for the sake of showing your loyalty to it. And one way or another, again, one way or another, love him, hate him, care, agree, disagree, whatever it is. The fact is that out of the five names that are, that are going to be working with Trump, the fact that three or four of them are within the last couple of years were Democrats and now consider themselves to be in between, but feel like they can accomplish more, with just this group of people together that haven't had the opportunity. I think that that's a great example, another great example of why of why we shouldn't just be married to one perspective our entire lives. And I really do hope and think that if they win, I'm not just being idyllic, and I'm not just being romantic about the idea, but I really do hope that they can really create this kind of little world, or help run the country in a way that is really really unified in what a lot of excuse me, what a lot of Democrats and Republicans both want with their lives. Like at the end of the day, we want to be healthy. At the end of the day, we want an opportunity to raise our kids in a safe, healthy environment. We want to be able to, to whatever. So the point is, I don't want to get too bogged down in that, especially by my just on the solo episode without any kind of pushback or any kind of response, because I think that's also important. And have this idea challenged by anyone is a really good thing to do. So again, not married to it, but yeah. So I think that it's going to be, I think that I hope that that as a world and as a culture, we become more adept and we become more socially willing to just not be, to grow and to change our minds and to develop ideals and to not be the same person we are when we're 25 as we were when we were 20, and to not be the same person when I'm 28, when I'm 29 as I was when I'm 28. And I don't think I am. And I think that if I'm being honest with myself, and I think if I live an intellectually and emotionally honest life, I think it's almost impossible to be. So we'll see where things go. I'm going to, I mean, I'm really curious as to what, what industries my next guests are going to come from. I would kind of like to get maybe a little bit more into the psychological world, the world of psychology, the world of figuring people out, the world of, but the world of like the arts, humanities. But also, I think that if I get a really cool science, really interesting scientist on, just to not only just describe. I have a very difficult time having long form conversations with people about something that I don't feel really is relevant to me or interesting. And I think that some of the best and smartest people, what they're capable of doing is taking really abstract and complicated topics and making them accessible and making them universally understood and making them digestible and relevant to everyday life, because that really is what it's supposed to be. I mean, all these abstract ideas are trying to understand our world and trying to understand our lives and the way that our lives work within that realm. So, if I can find people to do that, I would love to. So I'm going to wrap that up. I'm going to wrap that up right now. I hope to have another great guest today, tomorrow, one of these upcoming days. My good friend David Stauber, who's got a lot of great experiences and great stories, and I'm really fascinated to dive into it with him. So stay tuned, stay with it, and I'll talk to you guys soon. Bye, everyone.